Randomness, chance, and luck influence our lives and our work more than we realize. Because of hindsight bias and survivorship bias in particular, we tend to forget the many who fail, remember the few who succeed, and then create reasons and patterns for their success, even though it was largely random. Mild success can be explainable by skills and hard work, but wild success is usually attributable to variance and luck. So that was from Nassim Taleb's book, Fooled by Randomness, and here today to discuss it with me is Allison Giddens. So Allison, welcome.
Hey, thanks for having me.
You're welcome. Glad to have you here. So you picked this book out of my list, so yeah, tell me your thoughts and why you wanted to go with this one today.
Well, I picked this one partially because it's one of those books I kind of always come back to, and I always have to kind of remind myself certain concepts or certain themes that popped up. And I think you covered some of those just in the opening quote alone. I mean, the notion that, you tend to think, oh, that's so random, or gosh, that's such a funny happenstance. But when you really get down to it, you think, okay, is it truly random, or is it something I'm just happened to noticing because of cognitive bias or whatnot?
Yeah, very true. Yeah, there's so many different ways to take this. This comes up for me a lot in business because Allie and I have been in business for 15 years, and people say, how did you guys know you're the right partners for each other for business? And how it was total luck. We could have just as easily been bad partners. I don't have any great lessons there because certainly we've worked hard at it and stuff, but I see the role that luck played in doing that, and it's frustrating in some ways, but I'm very thankful in a lot of ways, so it's worked out well in that regard.
Yeah, and that sounds kind of very similar to my business partner and I. It's kind of chance that we ended up the way we are, too. He had been here at WinTech for 30 years, and I'd been here 17, so we knew each other long enough, but when the opportunity came to buy our company, it was kind of like, oh, gee, we're both in the same place at the same time.
Yep. Yeah, it can be that way. And again, yeah, I get frustrated with that even with sales and stuff too. It's who I happen to be sitting next to at an event that needs a new website. I don't want to sell stuff because of who I happen to sit by, but that's how it goes sometimes. And
yeah.
That's how we lose jobs sometimes too, because we would have been a better fit, but someone else happened to be in the right place at the right time and got lucky, and
yes.
That's just kind of how things go. So
yep.
It's all good. So many areas I want to try to cover with this book, and certainly, lead us where you want to go. But one thing I see a lot lately is this is the quote from the book here. They say, quote, "People do not realize that the media is paid to get your attention. For a journalist, silence rarely surpasses any word." So I'll see people on social media saying, "Oh, look out! They manufactured this event to get something new in the news." I'm like, no, they're always going to find something new in the news. That's what their job is.
Yes.
And so things again are sort of random to get in the news, but it's not manufactured. I don't think they have to come up with something to say, and they pick the biggest story. I don't believe there's a big conspiracy to make another big story. There's just always stories coming.
Yes, and I think there was a point in the book where they talk about the ratio of undistilled information to distilled is rising.
Okay.
And so they talk about, and I think that's a kind of a piece of the media conversation, right? You want more distilled information, the concepts that kind of stand the test of time,
yep.
Rather than these reactionary opinions or these headlines that grab you and you're like, oh gosh, to your point, either oh, they're just manufacturing something, or gosh, they're blowing something out of control or out of proportion. Whereas if you do have that cognitive bias, now you've already made your mind up as to whether or not that headline is legit.
Mm-hmm.
It makes me think of, I don't know if you watch Tokyo Vice on HBO Max.
No.
So it's kind of based on a true story about a journalist who from America who ends up going to Tokyo and wants to be a journalist and wants to understand the Tokyo underbelly and Yakuza and all that kind of, it's a crime drama.
Gotcha.
But it's fascinating to me when he sits down at the computer in Japan and is working on a story, and the media or the newspaper he works for they're very strict on your providing the details of the facts.
Gotcha.
And it's almost like when you focus on the facts, just the who, what, where, why, how, it gets probability. It kind of to me it diminishes the importance of probability. Nobody's sitting there saying, oh, well, what were the chances of that? Or, oh gosh, right place, right time. It's just you're focused on facts rather than sitting here and taking advantage of the cognitive bias, if that makes any sense.
Interesting. Okay. I like that. Yeah, I can see that. I think the other problem with, and I wish we had a lot more just facts like that here in the U.S., I think the problem is facts tend to introduce nuance. You can say, well, this is the good thing that happened. This is also the bad side of it, and no one's going to listen to you or vote for you if you're playing both sides. As I wish everyone would. You have to kind of slam all the way to one side or the other and say the facts that matter to you, and then your opinion on top of that, and ignore the other ones. And yeah, it's very, very frustrating how things have gone this way, where the nuance has disappeared, and because we don't vote for nuanced people, which is very unfortunate. Yeah,
not anymore. But yeah, no, I liked the simplification of issues that typically get very complex. I think the author talks about how it's very dangerous, when we oversimplify things. But it's tough not to oversimplify things, because your brain is constantly looking for patterns and trying to make sense of things. And so good or bad, you either are calculating things due to luck or to skill, or you're calculating things based on, gosh, it's always got to be me, shucks, golly gee.
Yeah,
so.
I try to pay attention to that too. Like in the grocery store, I do pick the wrong line from time to time, but I try to pay attention to know when I pick the right one, because it's going to happen half the time.
Yes.
You just only notice the bad ones. I try to make a note of hey, I got the right one today. This is pretty cool.
Yeah. Yeah.
But you mentioned, so going back, she talked about hindsight bias a bit. I mentioned in the beginning that one is fascinating to me. Annie Duke. Have you read much of her stuff?
No.
So Annie Duke is fascinating, where she talks a lot about decisions versus outcomes and how you shouldn't tie them too closely together necessarily. She's a former poker player, and so she gives the example of if you start a hand with two aces and you end up losing that hand of poker, the lesson shouldn't be if I have two aces I should fold. It's just it didn't work out. You made the right decision to stay in the hand, and it didn't work out. You can see the opposite of if I got super drunk tonight and went and drove home drunk and made it home safely, well, cool, that was a good decision then, because the outcome was good. No, it was still a bad decision with a good outcome, and separating those can be so difficult to do, but it's huge to be able to really understand, I did the right thing on that project, it was all right, it just happened to go bad, I'll still do the right thing next time, versus, oh, I tried to do the right thing and it went poorly, so that must have been a bad decision. No, it was still maybe a good decision.
Yeah, I wonder if Annie, you said Amy Duke or
Annie Duke?
Annie Duke, yeah. I wonder if so Maria Konnikova, have you read her? No. The Biggest Bluff.
Okay.
That's how I learned to pay attention, master myself, and win. And she was a psychologist turned poker player.
Okay.
And she does talk a lot about probability and randomness in the book. So I'm trying to reflect to see if I can recall any of her kind of references. But I'd be interested to see if she tapped into some of Duke's concepts there, because that would make a lot of sense.
We'll have to check that out. Very, very likely. Yeah, Duke led one of her books with the Seahawks in the Super Bowl, whatever it was, 8 or 10 years ago, where they got intercepted right at the end of the game. What a horrible decision that was. But she breaks down how it was actually a great decision. That pass is almost never intercepted. It gives you a chance to run on second down. All the reasons it was a great decision, but everyone says it was so stupid because it went poorly. And going back, no, it was a good decision. Just had a very public, very horrible outcome. But it doesn't mean it was a bad decision. It's
Yeah. No, that makes a lot of sense. Well, we use those framework, we use those heuristics to make those decisions. So if the outcome does look pretty crummy, it automatically does make. Yeah, I've noticed that a lot when it comes to football.
Well, yeah. All sports, yeah.
Yep. Everybody's a Monday morning quarterback or Tuesday morning, depends.
Well, I'm a Lions fan, and so the Lions, of course, lost in the NFC Championship, and a lot of people blame the coach for going for it on fourth down a few times when he shouldn't have. I'm but statistically, those were the right decisions. It just worked out poorly this time, and in retrospect, certainly, sure, go kick the field goal, but you didn't know that. He made the right choice. Yeah. In the book, the quote I pulled here is, quote, "A mistake is not something to be determined after the fact, but in light of the information available until that point." And so, it's easy to call it a mistake because of what happened later, but you don't call it a mistake based on what they have at that point. And even then it's tough, because you sort of mentioned you can cherry pick which items they should have looked at more carefully versus the ones they did, but making a decision, there's thousands of things to choose from. You have to make a decision, and in retrospect you say, you should have noticed those too, but it was out of 1,000 different points. You wouldn't have, other than in hindsight.
Yeah, the absence of the knowledge of the consequence just happens to prompt the decision in the first place. So unless you know how it's going to end, can't blame you.
And then she talks about survivorship bias a good bit too, which is another one. I discovered that a few years ago. It's just a fascinating idea of, came from World War II with Nicholas Wald, I think, or Abraham Wald. There we go. Nicholas is the writer of this book. And when planes would come back from the war, they'd look at where they were shot and say, here are all the places they were shot. We should put more armor on those places. And it turns out, no. If they were shot there, they survived. It's the ones that were shot in the other places that crashed and burned that we should put more armor there because they'll make it back. But you just look at the ones that survived and kind of make your assumptions on that. And so we see that with business leaders and athletes and stuff. We see the ones that made it, like, clearly we should drop out of school, drop out of college, because that's what Bill Gates did, and that's what Elon Musk did, and that's what Michael Dell did. All these, clearly you should drop out of college, but no, we just saw the 3 that dropped out and made it rich, and we didn't see the other 99% that dropped out and are struggling now because of their decisions. So survivorship bias is a tough one too, where you see the success and then see what led to it and say, that's the path, even though, that's the 1% that did it that way. You might want to make a better decision. But all this, so much of this stuff all kind of rolls under different things.
Yes. The remembering that no one accepts randomness on his own success, only the failure. Yep. So that, I think that was one of the things that sticks with you, and you look at LinkedIn and you look at everyone that rightfully celebrates good things that they've done. Mm-hmm. And it's very rare that you see someone post on a failure, but it's kind of funny because even when they do post about failures, it's kind of still patting themselves on the back,
yes, correct. Yeah.
And so it's interesting to see people's attributions to what contributes to their success. I think that the author quotes baseball pitcher Vernon Lewis Lefty Gomez, who says, "I'd rather be lucky than good."
There you go.
So it's I don't know. There's the idea that we all got here, or you have your successes because you've worked hard, or whether you've been lucky and randomly you were just right place, right time. Mm-hmm. That stuff's always fascinating to me. The idea, who takes advantage of the luck, right? Luck, fortune's the prepared.
Yeah, there you go. Yeah, there's luck versus chance, and I think chance is really more what we're talking about here, because luck, I think, is chance and hard work. It's still obviously a factor of numbers, but hard work can make you seem luckier a lot of times.
Yes, and miscalculating probability. That's always kind of a fascinating thing to me when you figure, there's a greater chance of me getting XYZ if I do it this way, when it's just all built on how it happened before, which might not really have anything to do with what's happening now.
But that can be tricky too, because you may calculate there's a 90% chance if I do it this way it'll work, and it fails. You still might have been right. You might have made it 9 out of 10 times. You just, again, that goes back to the whole luck thing. But I love your social media thought though too, because certainly Facebook's another place we see that. We see all these other families are so much happier because they're always just at the beach and hiking, and Allie and I have struggled with that a bit with our company, because we'll see these other marketing companies say, wow, we're trying to figure out what we're doing. They all have it all together. They have it buttoned up. Like, they have it great. And then they go out of business, or they lose a bunch of people. Like, oh, maybe they didn't have so good. They just kind of showcase they did. And it's not an excuse for us to slack off and not try as hard, knowing that everyone else is suffering. But it's not like we're way behind everyone either, I don't think. I mean, I wonder... There are some companies I look at, and the more I get to know them, I'm like, wow, they really have their stuff together. Most of the time, the more you dig in and say, okay, they're good people, but they struggle just like the rest of us do. They just don't show the struggles. Like we don't either. I mean, heck, if you look at our social media, we look perfect too, I hope. But I promise we're not. I
it's the highlight reel, right?
Exactly.
Yeah,
yep.
It's a highlight reel. It's not life. And I think the quicker people realize that, the more friendly social media becomes to mental health. You don't go on it to check on everybody's status. You go on it to see the highlights.
Yep. Yeah, it's one of the things I love. I'm in one of the CEO roundtable groups with the Cobb Chamber. I don't know if you've done that before.
Yes.
Feels like something you would have, And that's fantastic, because it's all these other businesses that kind of open up. After a few months, they start saying, here's where I'm struggling, here's the problems I'm having. And like, wow, I have the same problems too. Let's work on it together. And it's rare to get that kind of group, because, again, social media and public stuff, it's all just shiny and packaged and ready to go. So it's a little different.
Yeah, for sure.
Another area I noticed in the book, he kind of hit on stoicism a good bit too. Just the idea there. The quote here is, the only article Lady Fortuna has no control over is your behavior. Good luck. And so that's a lot. Back in episode 7 of the show, Bobby Kirsch and I talked about Ryan Holiday's The Obstacle is the Way. And Ryan Holiday's huge on stoicism, but it's basically, control your behavior. Luck is going to be good. It's going to be bad. It's going to do things to you. How are you going to respond? And that's the only thing you really can control. So respond the best you can, make the best decisions you can, and sometimes you win, sometimes you lose, but if you keep making the right calls, odds are you'll win more than you lose. Have you read much of like Ryan Holiday or any stoicism stuff?
No, that reminds me of, well, you know what? Maybe it was Ryan Holiday. The Discipline is Destiny.
It sounds like one of his. His always have the little, that kind of name. I believe so,
That's a good one. That is, because in today's world of immediate gratification, you know, and just wanting change or wanting something right now, whether it's Amazon overnight or a bunch of likes on a social media post, It's just so much easier to do things and get immediate response. There was a conversation I was having with my best friend who's a nurse and a school nurse. And I had lunch with her the other day, and I asked, what in today's generation, I mean, she's been a nurse almost 20 years. I said, in today's generation, today's kids, how are they any different than yesterday's kids? And without even hesitating, she said, I expected her to make some joke about Gen Z or whatever.
Right.
But instead, she said, today's kids don't know how to be uncomfortable.
Okay.
And that, I think, feeds into that notion of lack of discipline. To me, it feeds into maybe some of the conversation about randomness. If we don't know how to be comfortable, and we're not disciplined, and it is about the here and now, how much of that is feeding into cognitive bias? How much of that is just fueling the fire?
Gotcha.
I don't know.
Interesting. Yeah, I feel like that probably is related to we don't have a chance just to sit in silence either. We always have something to do. And I try to force myself to do that from time to time, but it's tough. Like I struggle with that, but it can be huge just to not have any distractions and put your phone in another room and just kind of just chill for a bit. And it's very uncomfortable, but it can be great. That's why I think we have like shower ideas and stuff, because that's the only place where you're doing something without some other, stuff in your ears. Even when I'm mowing the lawn, I'll often listen to podcasts or whatever, which gives me some ideas, but it's different than just mowing the lawn and just letting my mind wander. And perhaps I should do more of that. So we'll see. I think lawn mowing's starting pretty soon here for us for the season, so that's going to be super fun. So, awesome. You'll need to check out Annie Duke's stuff because hers is fantastic.
I do.
Any of Taleb's stuff is great too. I've really enjoyed this book and this concept quite a lot. So I'll kind of leave it with, he said this last little quote: "No matter how sophisticated our choices, how good we are at dominating the odds, randomness will have the last word." So I think, again, we should make good choices. We should make sure our decisions are based on what the decision, not the outcome, all that kind of stuff. But randomness is going to play in, which we need to remember. It kind of goes to the idea of like other people and other drivers on the road and stuff. Just thinking of, if they do something dumb, it's because they're dumb. If we do something dumb, we have a good reason for it. Like randomness kind of factors the same way too, where we might get lucky and succeed where someone else fails, and knowing that it was luck that did it is important to remember, I think. So,
I agree.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for being here. If folks want to connect with you, where can they find you online?
Find me on LinkedIn. Reach out, send me a note, tell me you're listen to us on the podcast, so I don't think you're a spammer. So yeah, looking forward to it.
Good call. And I'll put a link to her LinkedIn in the show notes. So Allison, thanks so much for being here. Appreciate it.
Thanks for the chat.